Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 4th episode of the Best Games Period. I'm Jack Gardner. With me today are my co-hosts, Jeremy Brown and Daniel Jones. And today we're going to be talking about a very special game from 2001. That's right, we're going to be talking about Ico.
Devil May Cry. What? No?
No. And I'm going to call it Ico, even though I know the technical way to say it is Eco. But I'll leave that up to the academics in Washington.
It's Eco. Just so you know.
I'm still going to say it Ico, because I can't help myself.
When Fumito Ueda says it in Japanese, you can hear him say Eco.
Well, why don't you just speak Japanese if you love that so much?
Yeah.
Domo arigato.
Mr. Roboto.
Most likely I'm going to end up saying both several times throughout this episode, so...
At some point, we should actually do a Devil May Cry episode, though, also, by the way.
Okay.
Side note.
I'm down for that.
Because I love that game.
Okay.
Okay.
I did not, and that will make it a good episode.
Oh, fantastic.
Much like this episode, I think.
This may be our most debated episode yet.
And I'm honestly very surprised because we usually don't talk a whole lot before we start recording, but you guys both told me you weren't huge fans of Ico, of revisiting this game.
Well, don't put words in my mouth.
Those were the words that came out of your mouth.
I just stated, all I stated was I may not, at the end of the day, agree with your opinions, and I said that because I thought I might not be able to be here tonight, but I'm here, so...
Well, you know what? You're supposed to agree with all my opinions, Jeremy, so... They're obviously the better ones. I mean,
so what are our opinions on Ico? Jack, what's yours?
Fine. I'll go first.
Yeah, just go first.
I think it's an incredibly important piece of video game history. I think
Certainly.
It has influenced many games in the almost 15 years since. I think it's probably one of the greatest games to come out on PlayStation 2. And it came out, like... How's this for a mind blow in your mind? I almost said mind blow, and that I feel like that might have different connotations. But it came out 2 years after Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Like, compare the polygons of Ocarina of Time to what we see in Ico, and it's insane. You have bloom lighting in Ico. You have freaking shadows that aren't circles on the ground. Like, you have these fantastical environments. You have storytelling that is done through cutscenes, or without cutscenes.
Also, a nice little touch is it had the legs of the characters actually bent realistically when they were going up and down stairs.
Oh, yeah?
I'm serious. Yeah, that was an innovation that Ico... I can't remember the name of the term, but yeah. It was one of the first games to have that.
That's actually pretty cool. Although
Contracted articulation, I think, is what it's called.
I will say that when Ico especially is running around, his legs look super weird. Nobody runs like that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I cut the game some slack because those animations are really nice.
Are we really starting out comparing this game to Ocarina of Time? I mean, really?
No, I feel like we shouldn't really.
Really? Because I feel like...
the art styles are completely different for, I don't know.
I mean,
everything.
I'm not talking about the art.
Game,
I'm not talking about the art style, though. I'm talking about the technology
graphics in general and the technology. It's just okay.
Like,
carry on.
It's a 2-year difference, but they
3 actually.
Is it a 3-year difference?
Came out in '98. Yeah.
Okay. But still, it's not that big of a difference because the game started development in '97 or something like that.
Yeah,
it was intended to be it started development for a late PlayStation 1 game, as I recall.
Right.
Yep.
And ended up being an early PS2 game, yes.
Yeah, so it took a little bit longer, but I think, I don't know, I find everything about Ico to be incredibly impressive. And I think it is a fair comparison to make between The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time and Ico. I think they're both adventure games set in, large, expansive worlds that you explore. You have to solve puzzles. I think that this is essentially Fumito Ueda's Legend of Zelda. Like, this is his version of that.
Jack, did you play this game in 2001 when it came out?
I played it a couple years after it came out. So I think
on
2004. Yeah.
Okay.
And then one of my friends stole it and never gave it back, and I think he sold it.
Is your friend my uncle?
So Jeremy, you don't really like Ico?
So I've started this game several times. The furthest I've ever made it was probably about 6 hours into it.
Yep. Same here.
I like the story. I actually like the story a lot. I never played it for the first time until probably 2010, 2011-ish. And the things that people raved about it regarding the bloom lighting and the graphics and all that just weren't there at that point, and they're still not there, in my opinion, at that point. Most recently, I played it on PlayStation Now. I rented it, put about 4 hours into it, and the cutscenes are amazing. They're beautiful. But the actual game itself, it just, in my opinion, does not hold up. Maybe if I played on a standard definition TV or a smaller TV, it might be better, but it's really just ugly. It is.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Well, I don't think. Hold on. Can we start with that? I'm just gonna lay into that because I actually disagree. I mean, I think it's a gorgeous game. I think it's beautiful. I did happen to play it for the first time in 2001 when it first came out. I have distinct memories of renting that game and Devil May Cry at the same time. I ended up buying Devil May Cry pretty much as soon as I returned it to Blockbuster because I just loved it so much. And then I did play Ico more later. I purchased it and finished. Not finished. I played probably around 6 to 8 hours. And I think it's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful game. That is one thing that I wouldn't say. I think that art style is this odd mix of realism and fantasy. And there are times when you're looking at it and it looks photorealistic, like the grass and the water and the way the birds move, even though they're not super real looking, but they just look like they fit so well in the environment. Oh man, that game's fantastic looking. Fantastic. You're crazy.
I am crazy, but I disagree. I don't think it holds up well. That's part of, at the end of the show, I'm going to say I wouldn't recommend it, but whatever. I mean, I don't
either, but the graphics, man.
I think the graphics at the time, if I had played it in 2001 like y'all, I might be completely in agreement, but I didn't. And this is the best games period, and we're talking about games that we've played now and whether they hold up, and in that area, I just don't think it does.
I think you're right that from a technical perspective, the graphics are inferior to what have clearly inferior to what has come since, but I think that the aesthetic itself is incredibly solid.
I think I would compare it to, say, like God of War. When I played that game first on PlayStation 2, I loved it. When I played the remastered version on PlayStation 3, I thought the graphics were horrible. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that's a baseline for people to understand where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you on God of War, but I just disagree on Ico.
You can be wrong. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think it's the aesthetic choices of Ico are just so solid that when you go back and look at it,
You're going to be saying eco by the end of the show, damn
Can we
it.
just
will
start
not.
calling it ICO?
Can I just say, every time I Googled eco, Google wanted to change it to ICP? No, I'm not Googling Insane Clown Posse.
Why would you? Who wants that? Nobody ever wanted that.
Apparently somebody. Yeah.
So let's talk about the things we don't like, and then we can get into the things we do like. How about that?
All right.
So,
But
I'll go
I
first.
am, for the record, saying that I think that Ico's aesthetic choices hold up the same way Wind Waker's aesthetic choices hold up when you go back and look at the original product today.
Really?
Yeah, I think in different ways. I think.
Do you just hate Zelda games, Jack? What's going on here?
No, I love Zelda games, but I think you can go back today and look at, you know, Wind Waker on the original GameCube, not the HD re-release, and I think you can be like, wow, this is a really pretty game. And that's the same feeling. Like, I booted up Ico right before this podcast just to kind of refresh myself a little bit.
Yep.
And I was pretty engrossed in it to the point where I almost forgot that we were podcasting in just a handful of minutes, and I was just running around looking at torches and like the whole structures, and maybe that's kind of it. I just really appreciate the architecture of the environments. It's really pretty.
See, to me, those things I could hardly see. And again, maybe it's my TV. Maybe it's because, I don't know. Maybe I should have played it on an old standard definition TV, and it might have been more impressive. But those things just looked terrible.
Wow.
And maybe we just value different things in like aesthetic choices.
Like the things in the distance, when you looked out at the overall scape, it was gorgeous. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
But up close, not so much.
No,
Just
the
saying.
grass, the water. You obviously got to the windmill part.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Oh,
There was a
you
windmill,
are
Jeremy.
crazy.
A windmill. It had
Daniel,
everything.
you're supposed to be on my side teaming up against Jack. What's going on here?
No, here's what I want to say, though. I went back and I played a few, like an hour or so just before the podcast as well. And I've been watching videos and stuff. And that game is just brilliant looking. But then the moment you actually start to play and stop just staring at the beautiful environments and the art and the architecture, that's where it all falls apart for me, is the gameplay. The art, I will not begrudge how pretty that game is to look at.
I'm not begrudging the art. I'm begrudging the graphic fidelity that people raved and ranted about in 2001. It's not the same now. It's just not.
Oh, well, definitely not. No, well, no. But that doesn't mean
And that seems
it's not
obvious.
still
Yes.
nice to look at.
Yeah.
But outside of that, there's so many little nagging things about that game that just don't really work for me and never have.
Okay.
Can I get into them?
Yeah,
Please
go,
do.
go for it.
All right.
I'm eager to hear how
So,
wrong you
for
are.
example, when I go to play tonight, just the first hour, right? I go to save, and I do appreciate that there's a couch pretty much after every puzzle or encounter with the black shadow beasts. But I went to a couch, and I don't remember, but I remember this happening to me constantly when I played it, anytime I've played it in the past. And I've played in starts and fits here and there. And I go to sit on the couch, and Yorda comes over to the couch, and she walks over, and it takes her about 30 seconds to walk over to the couch. And then she walks there, and I'm just sitting on the couch, just chilling, waiting, and I seriously waited for about a minute, and she still hadn't sat down.
Right?
I had
gripes
to get
about
up.
that too.
I had to get up off the couch and sit back down, and then finally she sat, and we could save. And that kind of thing happens all the time. And I was walking downstairs, and I went through a doorway, and got to the other side of the doorway, and she was not there.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I couldn't just have her following me. I had to be holding her hand and dragging her behind me the entire time. And it's little things like that. Like, I know that one of the reasons they changed this game from PS1 to PS2 is because of the AI. Sometimes when I think about that game and playing it, I think maybe they should have waited a couple more years because the AI just still wasn't quite there yet.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest problem is babysitting her, and it makes me not like her as much.
That's probably my biggest problem, too. I just kind of wanted to touch on the graphics part first.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add on that, Jeremy?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is kind of annoying, and, I don't really like escort quests in games in general, yet I love The Last of Us, which is entirely an escort quest, so I get how that sounds crazy and hypocritical. But it's confusing, it's not fluid, and even when you grab her arm and run with her, like, all of a sudden the controls get all wonky and you can fall off a bridge and not even realize it, just because it's not the same. And if you run a little ways away and then call for her, it takes a good 30 seconds to realize if she's coming or not, so you run back for her, and then you realize she probably is coming, but maybe she's not. The game feels very imprecise to me when it comes to, and Jack, you mentioned, like, combat you felt was intentional, but all the controls feel just so not right, like, really loose.
I will give you that the AI is sometimes frustrating, but I do think that the same way we kind of cut slack to older games because of the technology not quite being there, I think Ico deserves a little bit of slack for being one of the first games to implement a fully AI'd character, So, like, it is kind of sloppy, but at the same time, that laid the groundwork for a lot of other great AI companions in the future,
Sure.
This is like one of the first games where your companions weren't just following in a line behind you in a 16-bit landscape. They had to figure out how to program an AI to navigate around complex obstacles. I think that achievement, because when Ico works the way it's intended to work, I do think it is a very fluid game. However, like you guys have pointed out, there are a lot of times where it doesn't work as it's intended, and you get frustrated.
Well, there's times you try to jump up and grab a ledge, even though there's a little mark on the floor that shows you where you need to jump, or a chain, and you can, like, do that, like, for, like, 3 or 4 times in the exact same spot, and it doesn't work, and then you do it again, and then suddenly it does work. That's frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's very... go ahead.
Oh, well, there are those really imprecise things, but I would also argue that it's one of... The same way that The Legend of Zelda... I'm going to be making a lot of Zelda comparisons, but the same way The Legend of Zelda has a lot of contextual actions, this also has a lot of contextual actions, but it has the addition of a jump button. And I think that changes a lot of things, especially when the game was originally designed for PlayStation 1 and makes the leap to PlayStation 2. I think that had this been a PlayStation 1 game, it would have been much sloppier.
I don't know, man. If this game had a Z button or a lock-on button, game changer. Totally. Just saying.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see... I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Like, any improvements to the combat would be welcome.
Well, not just combat, but the traversing, everything. Like, like, you can see where you need to go. You can figure out the puzzles, which are fun. I like the puzzles. I actually don't even mind the backtracking. I like running around and finding all the things you gotta do, and the backtracking to do it. It's the imprecision that got to me at times.
I think, to me, it's not even like... It's not the imprecision. That's a hard word to say.
I don't think I said it
imprecision.
right either, but,
It's... Is that even a word, or is it, like, impreciseness?
I don't know. The
that's
sloppiness.
why I said Z button. I was just hoping to get away with that.
So, to me, Eco is a good analog to classic Prince of Persia games.
Oh, thank you. I want to talk about Prince of Persia compared to this game.
Well, not Sands of Time, but yeah, I am going to bring that up because it reminds me, the movement reminds me of the very first Prince of Persia game. On
Mac?
Commodore? Mac, maybe?
I remember playing it on Mac, but that might not have been the first system it came out on.
And that game has very deliberate movement, and Eco moves kind of the same. Like, you can't jump really easily. You're not Mario or Donkey Kong.
Well, you have to take the animations into account when you jump.
Right, you do, and that makes it just makes certain things kind of difficult. Certain jumps. And especially the camera doesn't always help with that. Sometimes the camera is positioned awkwardly for parts where you're like walking on a thin platform, or you have to make a very far leap. And meanwhile, in 2002, I want to say, Prince of Persia: Sands of Time came out, and like Jeremy, I think, was going to say, like, that game did a lot of the same things Eco did, and to me, in a lot of ways, did them so much better. The movement was more fluid, and it...
Came out in 2003.
2003?
Yeah.
All right. So I think it was inspired a lot by Eco, so it's kind of an unfair comparison, but, like... Just that's a game that does platforming in 3D incredibly well, and it's just I've gone back and played that game recently, and I still love it, but again, I have problems with that game. I hate the combat in that. But anyway, we're not talking about that game. But I don't know, just the way that Eco moves annoys me, and I'm not a fan of his deliberate movements.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can kind of see that, but you're bringing up all these points, and I don't necessarily disagree with all of them. But
yes, we got him on the ropes, Jeremy.
But I don't think that's the main takeaway from Ico. Like, I think that there are so many important things that it did, and that it does really, really well. Like, we haven't even talked about the fact that there's nothing on the screen. It's just the game on the screen. There's no health bar. There's no stamina. There's no ammo. There's no little menu or anything like that. There's no button prompts. It's just the game.
You
And
can't die from being defeated yourself. The only way to die is if you were to get sucked into that black hole.
or if you fall off a cliff or something.
Well, that too.
Where it's like painfully obvious that you're dead.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you know, I was watching to prepare for this. I watched some of the special features on the PlayStation 3 version, and that was something that very few people had done before. Just a completely clean user interface, and they struggled a lot with that. There was a lot of pushback to make it more traditional, to have a health bar, to have different game over screens. And Ueda really fought for this clean UI. And I think that ultimately that is something that really A, benefits the game, and B, really kind of sent a shockwave throughout the industry. Like, there are a lot of games now that do that, but I think Ico is probably something everyone can point to and be like, that's the reason we did that. Like, that's the big inspiration here.
Can't disagree with that. I think it's revolutionary and great on so many levels. I don't hate the game. I'm just thinking of it from a perspective. If I was a new gamer and had to go back and decide if I wanted to play this game to really complete my repertoire I don't know that it would be one of the ones.
Complete your Reptar.
My repertoire. Man, none of us can say words right
No.
today.
No, I agree. I'm with you because and I'm surprised that I feel that way because I like so many games that are inspired by Eco. Like I said, Prince of Persia, Journey, Brothers, Tale of Two Sons, like so many games.
Uncharted 3.
Almost any critically
Sure.
acclaimed game of the last decade can trace itself back to Ico.
Eco.
That's crazy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think that
Right.
at some point, if you're gonna sit down and say like, I am a well-rounded gamer, I think Ico is something that everyone should play to be able to say that. You know,
Sure.
like I wouldn't. I don't think I'd necessarily sit my nephews down in front of Ico and be like, play this until you can no longer play anything else, or like until your thumbs fall off. I don't know. I'm just saying words at this point, but you get the point. Like it's not kids' first video game material.
But I also don't, and
Even though there's a lot of hand holding in it, it doesn't hold your hand.
No, yeah, that's ironic. Yeah.
even not kids, if an adult has never played Eco and they consider themselves a connoisseur of video games and they want to complete their knowledge and they want to play it just out of curiosity, I go for it. More power to you, but don't expect to have a great time.
Oh my goodness. No.
Expect lots of frustration.
Expect
There
some of
is
the greatest
frustration.
puzzles before Portal. Like, this is one of the great puzzling games.
I would say before Prince of Persia. Like
was
Prince of Persia.
was Prince of Persia Sand of Time like a puzzle heavy game?
Oh, yeah. And
Second
big time.
half had a lot
Okay.
of puzzles. Yeah, really great puzzles.
Great puzzles.
Man.
And maybe
Yeah.
that's what I was expecting since I'd played many Prince of Persia games before I'd played this game, because it looked very similar to me. I like just, the whole landscape aesthetic visual thing. I'm like, yeah, and, the Eco and Yorda, I'm thinking Prince and Princess, but it just didn't work out that way, so maybe that's why I'm disappointed in it to a degree. I don't know. And the combat.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the
Can we
combat.
dig into that? Yeah.
Because here's my stance on the combat, and that is, it is intentionally sloppy because it's supposed to be a young boy trying to fight off shadow monsters. And so for most of the game you're swinging a stick of wood, and then eventually you get a sword, but at the end of the day you're still some weird... How old do you think he's supposed to be? Like 12, 13?
I was gonna say 11. So yeah, in that range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Preteen.
I mean, of course,
Yeah.
I'm gonna say 11, but still.
Yeah, I think it's probably 11 or 12, yeah.
Okay. It's...
Can I
It's-
ask real quick,
Yeah.
Jack? Because you know more about this game than I think maybe Daniel,
Maybe.
and certainly more than I. Why are the people that are taking him to sacrifice him? Why are their horns turned sideways? Yet they have horns, but they're banishing this kid because he has horns, or sacrificing him.
So I'm pretty sure, like, again, it never outright explains a lot of this stuff, but
Yeah.
I think it's heavily implied that the horns that they're wearing are helmets, and that,
Yeah.
like, you can see in the statues around in the environment that there are a lot of horned statues, and, like, it seems to be, like, some sort of religious significance.
Sure.
And
Well, and
Aiko's horns are, like, actually a part of his body.
so we're going to go into spoilers,
Yeah.
as we always do.
I think we've already established that's just a thing we do here on the Best Games Parade.
Yep.
But just in
But
case
I
for
like
some
to-
reason you decided to listen to the 4th episode first,
Yeah, exactly.
here you go.
So also, like, with the horns, the shadow figures are... you can see, if you look closely at them, and later they have horns. And they are... It's heavily implied that they are the other kids that have been locked up and sacrificed.
Yes.
So that's part of the story and the significance of the horns. I don't know.
Yeah, like, I think the nearby town or society or whatever, they have this thing where if a kid is born with horns, he's taken over to this island and marooned inside, like, one of these stone eggs to, I guess, just be left to die.
Yeah.
But Aiko is lucky enough that... Do we know his name is Aiko, even? Or is that just the name of the game?
I think that's...
No, it's Eco.
It's Eco, but I think his name is Eco. I think that's a given, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Aiko's lucky enough that when his captors leave, his egg falls over and breaks open, and then he ends up finding the Yorda, who is the daughter of this shadow queen that controls the shadows and lives on this island.
And she wants to take over her body to live forever, which is, the main reason I had a kid, don't get me wrong. I can kind of relate to that.
Yeah.
But why, when they drop him off, there's all these, really intact pods, kind of Fallout 4-ish, really, when they put them at the beginning in the pods. Spoilers.
Yeah.
And his happens to be the one that's all cracked and, susceptible above it.
I think...
Yet they put him in that one.
I think I got the impression that might have been, like, the last open one, or something. Like, all the other ones had been filled. Because it was the only one that was already open. Although, I don't know, magic, man. Who knows?
Who knows?
I do think it's interesting to talk about this story, though, because the story, I think, is one of the best things about Aiko. And there's hardly any dialogue in the entire game.
The story is fantastic. I will agree.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things I really like about Aiko, and another reason I think it really stands the test of time is because it's one of the first games to just be like, we're telling a story almost entirely through gameplay. And that story isn't, kid fights shadow monsters, saves princess. Like,
right.
It's an emotional journey of, two people helping each other get out of a situation, because Aiko can't go anywhere without Yorda, and Yorda can't go anywhere without Aiko. And it's like one of those great Disney buddy movies. For some reason right now, all I can think of is Milo and Otis.
I'm trying to...
And that's because I heard recently some terrible, terrible facts about that movie that will ruin it forever.
Oh, I read those a few years ago, yeah, but still.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't look it up if you want to enjoy that movie.
No, please don't.
But, it's two people overcoming these insurmountable odds to try and find some sort of life at the end of it. And I think that you can make a really solid argument that this is one of the first games to, seriously ask the question, can a computer make a man cry? And the answer is yes. A lot of people cried. This was their first game that made them cry. It's not a happy game.
No, it's not.
No.
Like I said, my gripes are pretty much the gameplay, and I guess that's it. I don't know.
To your aesthetic grapes, Jeremy, I have to say
grapes?
just...
To my aesthetic grapes? Like the little,
aesthetics,
the little
aesthetic
plastic
grapes.
ones? Yes.
Grapes. Yep. Grapes. Even
Right.
Coley saw me playing it, and granted it was the HD version, which does look better. But she
Does it?
watched me play it.
I'm not sure of that.
Yeah, oh my god, yes it does. But she looked at it and she was like, wow, this game looks fantastic. I was like, yeah, and this came out in 2001. She's like, what? She was shocked that it came out in 2001. She couldn't believe it. She thought it came out like a couple of years ago. Like, that's how good that game still looks.
I guess we have to disagree.
Okay, well, I just provided scientific proof that the
Coley
layperson
is
thinks
scientific
it
proof?
looks beautiful. Yep, yep.
Well, I watched many videos myself, some covered in mahogany, and most of them said that it's better off playing this game in standard definition the way it was intended, and it looks much better.
Well, I don't know about that.
I mean, there are always going to be some purists.
So, story. We kind of got into story, but we never finished it. So, Eco is, yes, banished, and he's sacrificed from his village because he has horns, and that's a bad omen.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, there's a bit of a shakeup, yet only his pod falls, and he opens up. He climbs to the top of this big old tower, and he finds this girl in a cage, which is Yorda, who happens to be this dark Shadow Queen's daughter. He gets her down, he rescues her, and they have to find their way out of this temple type of thing and back to somewhere. And eventually, the queen confronts him. She wants to use Yorda's body to make herself live longer because she's getting old. And
Basically make herself immortal or something.
Yeah.
Right?
And so eventually Yorda turns to stone. Things happen. Then what happens, Jack?
Basically, it ends with Yorda dying and Aiko escaping the island. The end. And it's
Sad.
sad. Yeah, it is sad.
Well, there is an alternate ending after the credits.
That is also true.
Yes. So in the alternate ending, which I think just happens after the credits, or do you need to, like, fulfill certain criteria before you get this? I'm not sure. Do you guys know?
What criteria is there to fulfill?
Yeah, I think it just happens
Yeah.
after the credits.
Yeah, I think it's just after the credits. If you stick around, you see that Eco has washed up on a shore in his boat. And he gets out, and he sees something down the beach, and you walk towards it, and it turns out to be Yorda, and she is on the beach, laying there, and Eco walks up to her, and she opens her eyes. Mm-hmm. She's alive, and they are free of the castle. So it does end on a up note.
Yeah, I mean, it does end on that up note, but what most people take away from it is the end where, like, Aiko's horns are broken, and Yorda just kind of like a ghost Yorda, sort of.
Yeah.
Picks him up and carries him to a boat, and then sends him out in the boat.
Yeah, she's a dark, shadowy figure.
Yeah, and
That's just kind of creepy.
Gorda.
and that, I don't know, that moment, because of all the frustration of having to constantly take care of her, because of all of the effort you went through to try and get her out, the gesture of her picking you up and carrying you to safety is just,
For sure.
it's really powerful. It's a really powerful moment, and that's something that isn't achieved through cutscenes, and it's not something that's achieved that could have been achieved with cutscenes. It's something that grows organically because the player has had to put up with Yorda for the entire game. Like, I'm gonna argue. I'm not arguing that it is intentional that her AI sometimes is stuttery and not great, but I am gonna argue that ultimately, even though there's a lot of frustration involved in that relationship, even though there's a lot of struggling and a lot of maybe not entirely kind feelings, and maybe some harsh words are shouted, I'm going to argue that ultimately that pays off in a beautiful moment. And that beautiful moment is worth all of that time and effort and...
Well, I just disagree. that all of that is worth it.
Did you make it that far? Did you make it that far?
No, I
There
didn't.
you
You
go.
know why? Because I distinctly remember the first time I played this game, getting to a part where the freaking dark beasts just kept coming, and there were flying ones, and they just kept grabbing her and taking her away, and I got so sick of it, and I distinctly remember saying to the TV, fine, take her. I don't like her anyway. And put it down, and I didn't touch that game for another 5 or 6 years. Because I just said, fuck it.
Well, you know what modern gaming would say to that, Daniel?
What?
Get good, son.
Get good.
Also,
yeah.
for keeping score, Daniel now has 2 F-bombs to buy 1, so yeah.
Well, here's the other thing. It's interesting that you cite that as an experience because, like another game that has already been featured on this podcast, Dark Souls, took a ton of inspiration from Ico. A ton of it.
It did, yes.
Like, even just comparing them side by side visually, you can see a lot of the same surreal architecture and angles and
Miyazaki has said that.
yeah.
Yeah, the way that they zoom in from the I'm just going to shut up now because you know what I mean. But yeah,
The sometimes wonky camera angle, it makes
exactly.
sense.
So many games have taken inspiration from this. I'm not ever going to call it a bad game or a terrible game or a not important game. Ever.
Right.
There's also a minecart level, for heaven's sake.
That's true. It's not nearly as frustrating as the Donkey Kong minecart level, though.
No.
But
Also not as fun. Alright, but I don't know. I don't think you're completely wrong, Jack, because I do think that what Ico did for video game storytelling is incredibly important because it basically said in an era where every game just thought that cutscenes was the only way to tell a story, or a couple games were finally figuring out what Valve had figured out in 1998 with Half-Life, but for the most part storytelling was a passive thing. But with Ico, they built up this connection between the player and this other character through the gameplay and the physical nature of you actually holding the R1 button to hold her hand. That's really important, that you have to hold that button to hold her hand and you have that connection, and that's tangible. And the game fosters that and builds that throughout the game. And throughout the adventure, so that by the end you do care. You are supposed to care about her.
Yeah.
And I mean, I never got there, so I don't know for sure. So, but a lot of people that did get there feel the same way you did, Jack. So, maybe you just have to get through the frustration. But to me, it wasn't worth it.
I will give you that it is sometimes really frustrating. It is a frustrating experience sometimes. It's not quite like Portal where the game is just the right amount of frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait, when was Portal ever frustrating? Portal was awesome the entire time.
Well, I mean, sometimes some of the puzzles can be kind of frustrating, and there are some platforming segments that are kind of frustrating.
Yeah, platforming segments. But I think for the most part, Portal was frustrating only because of your own limits,
Right.
your own limitations.
Yeah, big difference.
Right.
Yeah.
I will say that this game came out around the time where people thought of action-adventure games as being things like Spyro the Dragon, Crash Bandicoot, Ape Escape.
Yeah.
Like, those are its contemporaries. Like, that's...
Revolutionary is not an unfair title, similar to what we put on Dark Souls. I mean, it was very different for its time. Without even playing it at the time, I can see that.
I mean, I would argue that even today it's very different from a lot of the games we have. Like, the influence, you can see the influence throughout tons of different games, but if you go back and actually play it, it still feels different. It doesn't feel quite like anything you've played before.
I did go back and actually play it, and it still kind of was not that fun, but yes.
And I kind of agree with you. It's not fun in the same way other games are fun.
But if I had been an avid gamer in 2001 when this game came out, I probably would have totally loved it.
Yeah, that's right. This game kind of came out during your gaming dark ages.
I get that, and I acknowledge it. I mean, it was different. It was unique, and it made you hit, like Daniel said, it didn't really hold your hand, even though you had to hold somebody's hand the entire time. Mm-hmm. I like that about it. I just can't say for sure that I think that it's something you have to play to be considered a true gamer in this day and age.
Okay, I think we should stay away from being a true gamer because there are so many different kinds of gamers these days. But
yes, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will also attempt to make this argument that at the time that Ico was being developed and was released, Sony did not have many good first-party titles. A lot of its games were coming from third parties, like Capcom.
Yeah.
And I would argue that Ico is the game that made everyone go, oh, Sony can make games.
You know what I find interesting during this conversation is we're all jacked up Indian Mojo show for The Last Guardian, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which would not be possible without this game.
No.
So, I mean, there is that. Absolutely.
And if you look at the special features on the PlayStation 3 version of
Which
Ico,
are great, by the way.
They are amazing. They made like almost an hour-long mini documentary about both games, both Ico and Shadow of the Colossus. If you watch each of the people that they interview, and they're talking about Fumito Ueda, I'm probably butchering his name, and I really apologize if you ever listen to this. I'm so sorry. It seems to me like they genuinely think that he is a genius. And I think if you play his games, I think you can see it. Like, I'm pretty convinced he is a genius.
Well, the other interesting thing about that game is that he was so heavily involved with almost every aspect of it. Mm-hmm. The art direction, he even designed the cover art.
Yeah.
Which is terrible cover art, by the way.
Which cover art? Are you talking about the cover art where Ico is like front and center, and then there's like Yorda off to the left?
No.
Or are you talking about the Japanese one where it's like highly stylized and they're like kind of black figures?
Yeah, that one.
You think that's terrible?
It's terrible cover art.
What is wrong with you?
It's great art.
Daniel, I disagree.
It's great art, but it's terrible for the cover of a video game.
Well, so what? Who cares? Video game art on boxes has been terrible for years.
Whatever.
I will also say that was the Japanese version, so we have no right to complain about that one.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, but it's the cover on the HD remake, so whatever. Here's what I want to know, though, Jack. Why did the combat have to be so terrible?
Yes.
Just because he's a boy? I mean, because in Shadow of the Colossus, that team proved that they could do action really well. And that Shadow of the Colossus has some of the best boss battles in video game history.
Yeah.
And we'll do an episode on Shadow of the Colossus. We're not going to go into it.
I don't get the gameplay or art or aesthetic or any value of making the gameplays, the combat so terrible. I just don't understand any of that.
I don't either.
I think that a lot of what the Ico is about is telling story through gameplay. And so when you make a game about a 13-year-old kid who's locked in a castle and has to fight off monsters, he's not going to be good at it.
Yeah, but even if the monsters he's fighting are the other horned kids that got delegated and relegated and sacrificed, they're not going to be any good at it either. So why are they so much?
They're shadow monsters who've had hundreds of years to practice.
In what? Their pod? when I came
Are
out
they
of my
in their
when I-
pods when they're shadow monsters?
when I
don't
came out of
think
my
so.
pod in Fallout 4, I sucked.
But you got better pretty quickly over the course of like 20 in-game days.
And Eco does not.
Well, he's only in the castle for like a day. The game only takes like 10 hours to complete, and it seems like
this
it's
is
in real
true.
time.
He literally only has one animation for hitting them.
Yeah.
And it's swinging with swinging from right to left. And that's it. That's all he does.
We talked about...
And
yeah.
there could be more animations. Not to mention...
Could there be? I don't know.
Yes. Well, yes, there could have.
Not when the game was
You don't have
designed
to
in
be a martial
1997. Like these are groundbreaking animations. Can we really ask that it has the same amount of animation that something that came out 4 years later, like Shadow of the Colossus, did?
No.
He could have had a couple more.
I'm just saying, you
Animations.
swing at a guy, you should have more than a 20% hit chance.
Also, they're shadows, so he's literally trying to attack shadows.
But why does he just keep swinging for the legs when clearly you got to swing for the blue eyes? I mean, Eco is not stupid. He can figure out these insane puzzles. He should know at some point where to swing, especially after the first few tries.
I mean, I'm just saying it does a good job of conveying that he's an incompetent child that's just trying his best in a cruel, dark world that wants to kill him.
I'm an incompetent adult that's just trying my best in a cruel, dark world that's trying to kill me. I don't get no excuses.
And I don't know they could have changed it up a little bit. They could have made it a little less frustrating. And okay, Jack, let's get into this then.
Ooh.
Why can't she pick up a stick and defend herself a little bit?
Yeah,
You know what?
What kind of sexism is that?
I'm gonna be straight up. If you watch the special features, they come across as the Team Ico comes across as a little bit sexist, and
A little bit.
well, for example, they didn't want to do things that were too rough on Yorda specifically because she's a girl,
Right.
and that just wouldn't be right. And I also think that probably the reason that she doesn't pick up a weapon and fight is, part of it is because she's a girl, and the other part of it is because that's probably not part of her character. Like, that would be a completely different game.
Yeah.
Like, the relationship that they have going on there is that Yorda can open doors, but,
See,
Ico needs to be the motivation that gets her to the next one.
this is a weird game to argue about because none of us are really wrong.
You're right, Jeremy. Like, none of us are actually wrong. It's all just how we perceive it. But I feel like we should start wrapping up.
Yeah, we're pretty close to needing to wrap up anyway, so...
Yep. So where do we come down on Eco? Is it one of the best games, period? Jeremy, give it to me.
Eco is a revolutionary game that is extremely important to not just the PlayStation 2, but gaming in period. But if you don't need to go back and play this game to have, any... Yeah, I mean, no, it's not.
Wow.
All right, definitive. Jack.
I am going to use an argument that Jeremy has used before, and that is that when something's the first of something,
Damn you, Jack.
that makes it really important. And I think that for the flaws that Ico has, I think that it did so many things right, and it did so many of those things for some of them for the very first time, period, in games, that I think if you want to consider yourself gaming cultured, you owe it to yourself to go back and play that game, because it is one of the best puzzle games. Like, to me, it goes Tetris, and then you go all the way to Ico, then you go to Portal.
I remember back in the day, the first time I tried to play this game, it was extremely rare because it was hard to find on disc. And I paid like $60 for it at GameStop. And I thought it sucked, so I traded it back in within 7 days before, I couldn't get my money back. Today, you can spend $5.99 on PlayStation Now and complete the whole game. So, in that regard, give it a shot. Why not? But I don't think it's like a definitive game that really makes or breaks you as a person that enjoys video games.
I just think that, especially if you're into game design, you need to play Ico. And that, because there's one thing we haven't talked about so far, and that's the minimalist construction of Ico.
Yeah,
and
we touched on it.
We touched on it, but basically, this is the game where Ueda invented game design by subtraction. It's called, and basically, you start with a whole list of features that you want for your game, and then you slowly strip them away until you have the core experience that will make up your full game, and nothing to distract from that core experience. So you just keep stripping away and stripping away and stripping away. And that's how he ultimately ended up with that, the HUD that has no real user interface. It's just a game. And that is something that is incredibly influential. And that's why you'll see a lot of game designers today, over a decade later, pointing to Ico and being like, that is one of my main sources of inspiration.
I can't cite the exact article or the date or the time, but there's a Wired article that has just dozens of premier, to this date, game developers that look, quote Ico as being a huge inspiration to their games. Naughty Dog being one of them in Uncharted 3. So, it's important. It's not something you just, pass off.
Right.
Also, on that note, I'm gonna play my trump card. Who
my
cited?
God, I hate Donald Trump.
You know who has cited Ico as one of their main sources of inspiration? One of the things they think is a definitive work of art. His name is Guillermo del Toro, and I believe he's won an Oscar, and probably several other awards for being good at art, making art. And are you going to tell me that you're going to disagree with Guillermo del Toro?
Well,
the man who brought us things like Pacific Rim and Pan's Labyrinth and other movies?
His Silent Hill game did get canceled, Jack.
That's true, but that's because Konami sucks.
I love it. Exactly.
Oh, I have a theory that Sony's going to hook him back up with with Kojima.
You know what? Kojima should be out on his island, and he should just be brainstorming. Anybody that said he shouldn't go to his island and relax...
Who told him not to go to a deserted island? Crazy.
Where else do you get more brilliant
about?
Ideas?
Does he actually have an island?
He said in an interview that he was going to go away to a deserted island for a couple weeks to take a break and clear his head.
And somebody was like, you can't do that. You got to just keep creating.
One of his, quote, Hollywood friends told him not to do that because he needs to keep his creative juices flowing and not drop out of the game because it will ruin his flow.
Okay.
They're crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe there's a danger that he'll go to that island and you'll just never come back.
So what if that makes him
Ralph Waldo Emerson went to a pond and just sat and looked at it and came back out with a brilliant work of art.
I believe it was a golden pond.
Yeah.
Except Kojima can't really go and make games on a pond.
He can think.
In the middle of nowhere.
He can write. He can brainstorm.
He can. Yeah. Whatever. Yeah. Anyway. Off topic.
Well, on that note, Ico is his Walden. Bam!
Yeah, exactly.
Bringing it full circle. Yeah. Not everyone needs to read Walden, okay?
Man.
Not everyone's going to get a lot out of Walden. But you know what? Some people who think that they need to know more about philosophy and naturalism, you know what? They should play Walden. And by all this complex metaphor, play Ico.
Maybe
because it's one of the best games, period.
Maybe I'm
Bam.
feeling a little bit frosty, but this episode just became pretty thorough.
Oh, Jeremy. Sometimes you hurt me.
I bet you love it.
So this is a case of gameplay and the way that games age versus impact.
Yeah.
And I think Ico's impact can't be understated. It's had a huge impact on gaming. And if you want to understand that, you should play it. You don't have to finish it. I think you can get the gist of it just by playing it.
There's nothing wrong with playing it, but you don't have to play it.
Right.
I mean,
but
you don't have to play any game.
Well, you know what I mean, Jack. We're talking about the best games period. Like, we talked about Donkey Kong, and should you go back and play it? Yes, I absolutely think so. We talked about Dark Souls. Should you go back and play it? Yes, I absolutely think so. We talked about the Walking Dead. Should you go back and play it? You know, there was a bit of a division on there. But yeah, I think so. I don't think you have to play Ico.
So, in my estimation, is it one of the most influential games ever?
Yes.
Yes. Is it one of the best games, period? No.
How are you dividing that? I don't understand. Make me understand. Make me understand how you're reaching that point.
There are incredibly influential movies. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but there are very influential movies that I would not recommend anybody going back and watching.
Like French New Wave?
Yeah, or Cannibal Holocaust.
Okay. Although,
you know,
I think that is a horrifically unfair comparison because playing through Ico is way more enjoyable than sitting through Cannibal Holocaust. Plus, it's one of the shorter games that we've talked about so far.
Yeah.
In terms of gameplay, you can probably finish Ico before you finish any of the other games that we've talked about.
Oh yeah, it's like what, 8 hours?
Like, it's between 6 to 10 hours.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I mean, play it if you want to. Like, if you don't buy an original PS2 copy that costs you $9,000 today, play it. Enjoy it. Why not?
Yeah, play it.
But don't feel like you're an inferior gaming person because you haven't played it. I guess that's my point.
Or because you don't get it. If you don't think it's that great, then it's not that great to you.
Right.
Like,
I mean, I think we're all saying the same thing.
Yeah,
except that
we are.
I don't know that I would recommend if Donkey Kong Country were $60 to play Donkey Kong Country. I don't know that I would pay, $120 to play Donkey Kong Country. But if you can find it for $5, I would definitely say go for it. The same way where if you can get your hands on Ico for $5, if you can rent it off of PSN
Which you can,
for $5, that is totally... I think that there's almost no excuse for you not to at least try Ico and see where all these great ideas came from.
But you should try to rent it off PSN on a much smaller TV than I have, I think.
So I guess maybe we're at, like, an important juncture in our life as a podcast.
It seems we've reached an impasse.
We are still kind of figuring out what our criteria is.
Yeah.
And for me, I really do think that Ico is one of those games that you can admire and you can appreciate it even if you don't necessarily love it.
Yeah.
And so
It's like-
so just for me, it's not one of the best games, period. If you want to play one of the best games ever, play their next game, Shadow of the Colossus. It's fucking amazing. I keep swearing.
It's like Joseph Stalin.
But
It
it
has
really
its
is.
place in history, some good, some bad, but it's important.
Wow, did you really compare Ico to Joseph Stalin?
Why do we keep doing this tonight? We are awful.
No, that
There's
was
so
mostly
many
me.
bad analogies.
I was originally going to go Hitler, but I thought that was too over the top.
Wow, okay. So Ico is not Joseph Stalin or Hitler. It is an amazing...
Or Cannibal Holocaust.
It could be a Mussolini.
it is an amazing work of art that many people have pointed to as one of the first examples of a serious art, like work of artistic merit in video games. Yeah. And I think that even just with the historical context of everything that Ico has done, and like people should play it.
Yeah.
But I also think that it is an incredibly moving, beautiful, both emotionally and like, visually, and also the sound. We haven't even mentioned the sound yet.
The soundtrack is great. Yes.
There are so many fantastic elements to Ico that I can't not say that it's one of the best games, period. And the fact that you two don't agree with me, it has been blowing my mind. I thought this was just
We're not really that far apart, though. We just slightly disagree.
It's just slightly, but it's just slightly enough, Jeremy. It's just slightly enough.
I just disagree. I think if that game were made today, it would... It would. I think it would automatically have some major improvements in the way that things played out.
But if it were made today, it may not be the same. I mean, there is that. Like, I'm kind of torn. I'm honestly torn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the technological limitations of being made in 2001. Like,
yeah,
that is incredible. When this game was being made, the war on terror wasn't a thing yet. Like,
I think it's an artifact of its time, and it shows how far video games have come. But when you go back to it and actually try to play it for enjoyment, it's harder to understand what was so brilliant about it.
But, I think that's a problem that people had even at the time that it came out. Because
it didn't sell well. That's why it's so valuable. Like the disc copy, there were a ton of them. It was highly critically acclaimed, but not commercially.
Yeah, it's in the I keep going back to the documentary because I watched it not too long ago, but they talk about the problems they had in pitching the game to people higher up in the studio system, because it was really hard to tell, like, put into words or to even write down what made the game fun. Because I'm going to be honest, Ico isn't necessarily a fun moment-to-moment experience.
Nope.
But it is it's a journey. Like, it is a journey through sometimes good experiences, sometimes bad experiences, but I think that it is a very worthwhile journey.
Yeah, no. I can't disagree with that, Jack.
I have one last observation.
All right.
Because I think you're right, that I think they had a lot of problems with, like, getting people in Sony to really understand what was going to work about this game. And I think one of the things that, like, to me, and this is just my speculation, but I feel like the combat was shoehorned in there. And a lot of times you'll come into, like, a combat scenario right in the middle of a puzzle or right after a puzzle. So it's always designed to be integrated into areas where you have a puzzle, where there's puzzles or platforming happening. So you have to, it breaks it up and it ruins the flow of the experience. And I would have much rather just played through that game if it was just puzzles and there was no combat.
Slow clap. Okay. I actually agree with that. I think it would have been a better game without any combat.
Yep.
You know, I can see that argument too. But at the same time, I think the combat was necessary to a degree for the story that they're trying to tell.
It was necessary because every game in 2001 had to have combat.
No, I think it was necessary.
Yeah.
I think it was necessary because the story they're telling it has to involve some element of danger. And the environment itself doesn't necessarily...
You can do that without combat.
You can do that.
And falling off bridges isn't dangerous enough?
No, you can do that without combat, but the story that they were trying to tell involved a different kind of danger.
Yeah.
And it was one that falls into a weird category where the combat... It falls into a weird category where the combat isn't necessarily
It's not
good,
the focal point, and it's
but
not
it needs
the
to
point
be
of the
there.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
There needed to be some sort of tangible danger for the player to be afraid of, because I remember playing through this game, and every time those shadows showed up, I would freak out because it was
I'd rather
disturbing.
see some crazy weird-ass magic spell that dispelled the shadows as opposed to a flippin' stick that couldn't hit anything, though. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, you could argue that his horns are magic, and that's why he's able to dispel them.
Say, Simsalabim, my horn's gonna get him. I don't know. But there's things that could be done.
I don't know. All right, we got to wrap this up.
There are things that could be done, but we are not the geniuses that Ueda is.
No, absolutely
No,
not.
sure, no.
It's a great game.
But this was
I
also
am not
his first
taking
game.
away from the game. I'm just saying.
It's true.
You know.
He came from being an animator. Like,
Yeah.
what a huge leap.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
That's Japan for you.
I will close it out just by saying I really hope that The Last Guardian is half as good as Eco. So that tells you something.
Wait, so you hope it's half as good as Ico, but you wouldn't recommend somebody playing Ico?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It makes sense.
Just
in my
close
head.
it out.
All right,
Let's end this thing.
Anyway,
You're both crazy.
thank you.
Both crazy.
Thank you for listening to this very contentious episode 4 of the Best Games period. Jack, Jeremy, thank you for joining me. And thank you out there in listener land. If you like the show, let us know. Share with your friends. Tell everybody about it. We are now on iTunes. You can find us under the Best Games period on iTunes.
We're actually really easy to find now. Our previous podcasts were hard to find.
Yeah, that was insane.
It's super easy to find. Subscribe to us. Leave us a review. That would be awesome. We would love to get some reviews up there on our iTunes page. You can also find us on SoundCloud and on our hosting site Libsyn. You can also watch the video version of this on YouTube. All of this goes up on Mondays every week. Jack does an awesome job putting all that together.
Slow clap for Jack. Jack is amazing.
Definitely slow clap. You can follow the show on Twitter at Best Games period, and that way you will never miss an episode. So, thank you again for joining us, and we will be back for the next episode where we discuss Star Wars games, and each of us is going to talk about a different Star Wars game that we really enjoy, because everybody has Star Wars fever right now, and hope you do too. So you come and join us next week. Peace.